Awesome.
Recording.
Perfect.
Please. Okay, so welcome everyone. We are so excited that you're able to join us as we build our community of practice together. We're calling this Connecting Communities Through Story, and we're hoping that this will be a time when we can connect with each other, make a new friend, share some stories and ideas, and keep helping each other grow. My name is April Pikkarainen, and I am joining us today from the unceded and traditional territories of the Hunkaminam speaking people. And as I think about my role in reconciliation and in and inspiring and nurturing children's connections to the land, I also think about how we can continue to allow other voices to be heard and to ensure that we are taking an active role to surface the stories that haven't been heard and the narratives that haven't been heard yet. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you. And I'm Lauren McLean. I'm coming to you from Port Moody, BC, and I'm going to read to you the land acknowledgement that I've been working on alongside our grade 2-3s, as well as some special friends from our Indigenous Education Department. So let's take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. We're grateful to be on this traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Peoples, who have been the caretakers of this land for generations. We remember and respect the connection they have with the land, the water, and all living things. So thank you. So our goals and why we sort of decided to go on this adventure together is we really wanted to go on this journey to unite educators from diverse districts across BC and Canada now. So thank you, Lynn, and a few others that are coming from outside of the province. In the Connecting Communities Through Story monthly workshop series. So this was really crafted to foster collaboration. We wanted to share experiences and inspire deeper learning. And this series is really a platform for educators to engage in meaningful dialogue and innovative teaching approaches.
So we thought that we would start with the spiral of inquiry, or the theme of questioning and inquiry. When Lauren and I first started teaching together, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago now,
Yeah.
we use this framework, spirals of inquiry, which many of you are probably familiar with, and this really grounded our planning and our teaching and our way of being as educators. So when we started talking about reconnecting again in our practice and seeing how we can have some cross-district collaboration between Lauren and I, we thought about the things that we're noticing in our schools and our students, and also just within the school spaces. And we developed a hunch. We thought maybe that there needs to be a space for us to connect in a way that we can help each other grow our practice and to deepen our learning. And so this became a little project, or our little inquiry project. And we're curious to see how our connections will grow and how we can help each other grow as educators in this way.
And so I know this looks pretty text heavy. I tried really hard to pare it down, but the why we do it as educators, that it really encourages curiosity. So that we're asking questions, and that really helps stimulate our natural curiosity. And it really sparks that desire for us and our students to want to know more and explore the unknown. It promotes critical thinking. So really questioning challenges our minds, and it really helps make us think more deeply about a subject. We're analyzing information, we're forming our own opinions, which is really helpful for going beyond just that pure memorization. Fosters a love for learning. So when we're asking questions, we're engaging with the materials on a more personal level, and it really helps make learning a bit more rewarding for everybody involved. Develops problem-solving skills. So questions often lead to problems, which is good because it really helps develop the skills we need to solve real-life challenges. And how we do it, now I'm speaking really as a primary teacher. So in our grade 2-3 classroom, we're trying very hard to create a question-friendly environment. No questions too small, too big. We're encouraging that culture where curiosity is celebrated. We utilize our outdoor resources. So we are going outside weekly, if not daily. We're asking questions that connect our studies to the world around us. I mean, today would be such an interesting day to be with our students. We're incorporating open-ended questions instead of just yes or no questions. They're questions that really help deeper thinking and help allow for a variety of answers. And we're facilitating guided discovery, which sort of means that the students are trying to discover the answer themselves when we are providing tools and resources for them. We are also encouraging group inquiry because learning really is such a social activity. They're collaborating with peers, they're building together, they're discussing together, sharing their questions and their hypotheses. And then lastly we're documenting and reflecting. So we're recording the questions, we're recording their answers, and then we sort of get to see the projection, before, middle, and end of our teaching experiences. So sorry, I know that was text heavy, but it's really nice for us to sort of get our foundation sort of set up at the beginning.
Mm. And so we're really excited that we have 3 educators sharing their practice with us. And I have to apologize. I realized that as we're thinking about building a community, we forgot to ask you to share your name and where you're from. And so if you don't mind typing into the chat your name, the lands that you're from, maybe the district that you work in, we can start to build our little community in that way. Okay, and as you're doing that, Kat Porter and Victoria Durso are 2 kindergarten teachers in the Richmond School District. They send their apologies. They aren't able to make it today, but they did pre-record some stories that they wanted to share, and they're happy to share their contact information as well, and as they're a part of our learning community. I'll just play their video now.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Durso. I'm a French immersion kindergarten teacher at Gilmore Elementary. Today I'm going to share with you, along with the help of my friend and colleague Kat Porter, about some outdoor learning routines and how they help us to bring about inquiry and emergent learning in our classroom. Some of the routines that we engage in are nature walks, outdoor classroom, and gardening. We do nature walks twice a week, and in these times, we guide students on a walk through the school grounds to visit some of our special places. Often we visit shady forests, named by the students after the oak trees that grow in the area and provide us shade. On a nature walk, we use our senses to notice and ask questions along the way. When we arrive at our destination, we begin with an opening circle. We sing a land acknowledgement song and we introduce an activity. We spend about 40 minutes on a nature walk. So activities might look like sit spots, nature games, exploring nature using tools. To end, we often come together and reflect on our findings and share interesting things we experienced and wonders that they invoked. Outdoor classroom takes place on Wednesday afternoons. This is a chance for students to come together and engage in land-based learning. Sometimes we spend the afternoon in the garden doing center rotations to keep up with the garden tasks. Or if we have an ongoing inquiry, we will tie it into our activities through games, reflections, and exploration. The last one I have is the garden, which I touched on a little already, but depending on the time of year, we'll come out to water the garden, we might measure the plants, or if students are wondering about insects in the garden, this is an excellent place to dive deeper on those wonders. Getting outside with your students is such a fantastic experience, but it's not always the easiest. We found that collaborating with other teachers is so helpful when learning outside, as there's extra hands for management, elaborating on ideas, and documenting the learning. I wanted to share with you a bit about a bird inquiry I did with my Ks and my teaching partners class about a year ago. As most of our inquiries begin, students were noticing the birds in spring and seeing the nests in the trees on Nature Walk. As we began sharing our wonders about birds, we found a robin's eggshell, and that got us really excited. Student questions were the basis of our inquiry. They asked questions like, what birds live near Gilmore? How do they build a bird nest? Do they use their beaks? And what broke the egg? We kept the inquiry really broad at the start, looking into birds in general, their nests and their eggs. We shared the learning between our outdoor and indoor spaces. Indoors, we had morning messages around birds, read-alouds. We offered opportunities for book looks and note-taking. We had morning tables with sensory bins around this topic, and we incorporated some art projects around birds. We brought our learning outdoors by looking for bird nests and listening to bird calls. We thought about the materials a bird would use for their nest and built bird nests. We invited a parent who works with a bird sanctuary to teach us about birds of prey, and we made binoculars and walked to the dike for a birdwatching trip. We culminated our learning in a research project by having students choose a local bird that they were interested in studying. We ended up with eagles, robins, hummingbirds, and sparrows. Students then built a nest, created and painted an egg that reflected the eggshell color and size that is typical of their bird, and made a bird to go in their nest. In the photo on the right, you can see that we had some Ks who did a simplified documentation with a drawing. We had grade 1s in our group as well, and they completed a research book and presented their findings to the class. It's so fun to see the level of engagement when student interests are leading their learning.
Hi everyone, my name is Kat Porter and I'm a kindergarten and grade 1 teacher at Gilmore Elementary School. As Victoria mentioned, a lot of our inquiries come from some of the nature routines that we engage our students in on a regular basis. So one of the inquiries that I wanted to share today was something that my students explored last year around light and shadow. And this inquiry began on one of our nature walks when students started noticing their shadows and were very excited to explore their shadows and tell stories by making shadow puppets. And so this was something that continued on for a couple of nature walks. I noticed that this was a huge interest for my students, so I decided to explore it further with them. We came up with some questions together to help us ground our inquiry. And these questions were, where does light come from? How does light help us learn about shadows? And how can shadows help us tell stories about the land? So whenever we are exploring a new inquiry project, we like to find ways to explore our topic in many different aspects or areas within the classroom. So read-alouds are a wonderful way to do this. We found lots of books and stories that talk about light and shadows. Flashlight is a wonderful example that we used a lot with the students in the class. During morning provocations, I would often set up our tables with different materials that allowed the children to explore light and shadow in different ways. And we did a lot of storytelling around this inquiry. So the students had a chance to make their own shadow puppets. And then we spent a lot of time telling stories with our shadow puppets and documenting them later on during story workshop. So this is just a great example of how when we are engaged in an inquiry project, we like to find ways for it to live in the classroom in many different areas of learning. So today, Victoria and I just wanted to share with you a few examples of how we support collaborative inquiry in our classrooms. I think we both agree that we really value providing children with regular time and space to explore in nature. This is something that we have both built into our weekly schedules, and we make it a priority in our classrooms. We also encourage children to use all of their senses and to ask questions about the natural world, and we allow children's wonders to help guide the learning. I think Victoria and I would both agree that when we consider these ideas, we have to really reflect on what our role is as an educator. For us, we see ourselves as listeners who use observation and documentation as a way to capture children's ideas and questions. So when we're outside with the children, we're often paying very close attention to what they are interested in, what are they noticing, and what questions are they asking. So the documentation that we gather from these experiences allow us to begin to notice some larger ideas or themes. And it's from these big ideas that our inquiries start to emerge.
I love that. So it's nice hearing from two primary educators, and we're actually going to move into hearing some middle school examples before opening up to questions. So if that's okay, Jared, hopefully you have the ability to share your screen, and we're very excited to hear your experiences at an inquiry-based middle school.
Perfect. Yeah, I think everything should work out if it all goes well. I'm just going to warn you now, I'm not nearly as polished as the last presentation, but that's okay. Thank you, Lauren, for putting all this together. So we opened up a middle school in Coquitlam, Eagle Mountain Middle, 10 years ago, with the idea of an inquiry-based, technology-based school that we're also fortunate enough to sit right beside a beautiful park and forest that stretches up Eagle Mountain. So we kind of have a perfect blend of technology and outdoor resources available to us. So what I thought today, what I would do today is just share an inquiry that I went through with the students that I've done a couple of times now. And it all started with a couple of our inquiry questions as teachers. The first one was how do we continue to foster curiosity in students? The grade I teach now is grade 8, and depending how you look at teaching and the curriculum, it's very easy to move into a delivery type of teaching style with the curriculum, which really just sort of takes any type of curiosity away from the students, and it takes the ownership away from learning. So we were looking for ways to put that back in. So let me share my screen with you. Hopefully this works. Let me know if... this might not work.
You want to send it to one of us?
Hmm.
Oh,
There we go.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I quickly threw this together in the middle years. Basically, the idea was going for a more global perspective. These are my grade 8s. I'd love to introduce them to you. They are your classic teenagers. They range from 12 to 14 years old, 12, 13 years old. They're kind of your standard grade 8 middle school class. I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful teaching partner. We co-teach to 58 students with a room with an open wall. That's been like that all year. So we've got a lovely, great group of students. The inquiry question that I started with years ago was, how do I create a more globally aware middle school student? For those of you who experience teenagers or have teenagers or live with teenagers, they're teenagers. They are very, very self-involved. They don't generally think too far outside of their little world of friendships and school and extracurricular activities. So getting them to broaden their understanding and their ideas of the global world around them can be a bit of a challenge. So what we decided to do was start with some bigger questions, and these were questions that we gave them. So as you can see, the first question, what are some key factors that contributed to the birth and evolution of human endeavors? When we started with this question, we looked at it and we thought, do we even understand this question? And from a teacher's perspective, sometimes it can be kind of scary to go into something not knowing what the answer is, what the outcome is. But one of the beautiful things I love about inquiry and teaching is that It can be messy, and that I don't know all the answers. And I don't want to know all the answers, and that's not the point of being a teacher in the classroom. So a lot of our learning takes place with them. The second question we asked to sort of focus that idea is what ideas, innovations, or people have transformed society or the planet? And this ranges from beginning of recorded time to current day. And I'll show you where it goes in a couple of slides. And the final question was, what are the consequences, positive or negative? So in the end, these three questions look like this. This is actually up on our boards now. We're just starting this unit again for, I think, the third time. And by the time we do some hashing out, we teach some lessons, we look at some resources, we discuss some game-changing ideas and innovations or historical events, the board eventually looks like this. And so what this is this is student ideas. This is student ideas and their thinking. And what we ask them to do is, as we flush out innovations and ideas that have moved humanity forward, they put it up on the board, and then they start to make connections. And the idea about the connections is that nothing in society is standalone. So even if we look at something, we look as far back as fire being a game changer, in that it allowed the cooking of food, and it led to people settling, and we look at settling as a connection to agriculture and farming, and what that's done for society and how it's allowed the human race to evolve. So these connections grow over time as we flesh out the resources, and their thinking is displayed for everybody to see, and for them all to take a look at the connections that are made. So from here, they start to develop their own questions after we explore topics such as agriculture, art, exploration, technological developments through history. It's really quite wide open. But what we like about this is that it's not a single topic and a single subject, that it really does cross all subject areas. So it's a blending of art and language arts and science and social studies. Part of the discussion we have is that even, especially when you get to high school, they put all the subject areas into distinct boxes, and those boxes never really cross over. So your science is specifically science. It's never really linked with your history or your social studies. But the way the world works is that there's no scientific development that doesn't have an impact on society. And when society has a need, it's often science and research that is able to fulfill that need. So after all of that, they come up with their own questions. So I've got some examples here of questions they've come up with. They quite often look at things that they can grasp in their own lives. So we look at global trade, we look at where products are made, where they come from, the social impacts of the materials that we encounter every day in our lives. Some of the students look at food and explore things like the 100-mile diet. We talk about the environmental impact of an avocado that's grown in a country far away and shipped over by plane, by boat, by train, how things are transported. And then some students, and this is something I had to learn over time, is you get a full range of questions. So the example of questions that I have here are some fairly high-level questions from some pretty outstanding students who were able to grasp larger concepts, but being able to also recognize that there's huge value in any level of question, as long as it's something that the student is passionate about. In the end, what we've learned is that really what it comes down to is student voice and choice is such a powerful engagement tool. When they are able to choose what they want to learn about, when they're able to choose a branch or a direction to take, it's something that becomes self-driven. It's something that they will put more effort, more heart, and more thinking into, and ultimately will take more learning from than something that I will deliver to them. The range of learning is far more diverse than I could have ever imagined. some of the things that I had to learn as a teacher in order to make all this work is to get messy and embrace the mess and love the mess. But always, I almost always say yes. And that comes down to everything from what topics they're allowed to explore, how they decide to present their information. I had a student who explored, sorry, transportation and how climate change has been changing that. And she wrote me postcards. She would draw on one side of things that she saw in her imaginary journey, and she would write research-based postcards. And she would send them to me every couple of days. And that was my way of assessing her learning. Other students love PowerPoints. Other students will create models or write newspapers. So it's really I've gone a long way from the everybody putting a poster on their desks and showing the same type of material. So I hope that's helpful. That's been our inquiry journey. We use inquiry for a lot of different subject areas. Like I said, they do cross over quite a bit. So it makes assessment interesting as well when I can start pulling different parts of assessment from the same project. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think that's about it for me.
That was amazing, Jared. Thank you so much. All right, so April, I guess we are going to open up. So, I mean, popcorn style, if people want to type into the chat, that's okay. Or just unmute if you have a question for Jared, April, or myself.
Or even a connection or something that maybe you want to share of your practice or something that you've tried and is just opening this up. I think maybe as folks are thinking of a question or maybe letting some of that percolate in their minds. Jared, something that you said was like I want to write down like every word that you said. It's like, oh my goodness. You said that the beautiful thing about inquiry is that it can be messy and it's really exciting to learn with students. And I love how in that approach, through that inquiry approach, you really put students at the center of what you're doing and the idea of, almost always saying yes. Like that, I hadn't thought about that and what are the implications as an educator when we do say yes. But I do have a question. I wonder, being at an inquiry middle school, connecting technology and nature, what have you noticed over time in terms of students' dispositions as learners?
Interesting. That's a good question. We have noticed we've noticed changes. I mean, COVID hit everybody. I always hate using it as it's almost like it sounds almost like a crutch of, oh, well, we had COVID and blah, blah, blah. But those years of doing things differently, really did seem to have an impact on the students. But I think what's stayed consistent is if you offer the students a choice of things to do, they do bring their best versus when I lay out a set criteria for them and they just jump through hoops for me. I think what we have now is we have students who are more able to access the information through technology. They are more versed in the technology. Sometimes that's more of an issue than a good thing. But it also helps with the teaching of things. So when we look at how you access information, how you filter information, the students tend to be more naturally inclined that way these days, I think, versus when we first started. When we first started, there was a lot of troubleshooting. How do we do this? students not knowing where to go or what to do. And I think because they're more in tune with technology and they've had it for longer at different levels, they're just able to navigate it a little bit better than they haven't in the past.
Hmm.
I think I answered your question. I'm not 100% sure if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And also noticing some comments in the chats as well from folks who are engaging. Janice, yeah, that's true. Like nurturing that stance of inquiry could sometimes be challenging with older students. And sometimes I wonder, why is that? Like when we think about our youngest learners, even our 2, 3, 4-year-olds, that natural curiosity, that natural sense of wonder, what is it about I don't know, our schools, our education that has nurtured it out of them? I don't know if that's even the proper way of saying it.
Well, it's squashing it. I just had a conversation this morning with a administrator in Quebec, and we were talking about this very thing that they start to see around grade 3, 4, 5. In their case, it's when marks become an issue, and so it's kids don't do things unless it counts towards their mark, and it becomes less about that sort of natural curiosity in the learning, and sort of that jumping through the school hoops or playing the game of school. And it's unfortunate and it's societal and it's systemic. So when we have opportunities like Jared's speaking about, where you have a school that has a mission or a focus around that, and you have colleagues and parents and students who are all on board around that, that can compensate for some of the systemic issues I think that we have around fostering and nurturing that natural sense of wonder and inquiry and curiosity.
Hmm.
I think also, Jared, you did a really lovely job of describing that journey. I think it's also really important in your classroom environment to really embrace mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're doing inquiry like that, it can be very overwhelming. But if you're checking in with students, I know that's something that always worked for me when I was doing guided inquiry or independent inquiry with students, that those check-ins are really important, conferencing with the student so that they don't feel like they're all alone. Because of course their brains, they still need that help with executive functioning and scaffolding. And so when sometimes educators feel like, oh, it's too big to handle and it feels so out there. But, as Jared was saying, that's where the real joy for their learning comes in. And don't we want that? We want their joy of learning and we don't want to shut that down. So I think also creating that ability to make mistakes is really important, and being okay with that. Because as Janice said, it becomes very focused on marks. And so that needs to be a conversation with your learners about what do mistakes mean. And it's okay to make mistakes, and we're all going to make mistakes. And I'm going to give you some descriptive feedback, and, we'll carry on from there. So I think that's another important part of your classroom environment.
Yeah.
I think one of the nice things I love about doing the inquiry projects, Jen, because you're talking about marks and marking and conferencing and being with them through the journey and through the process, is with the inquiry learning, you're not waiting for a final product anymore. The final product is a celebration of learning versus going around and doing a big assessment. By the time we get to the presentation part, I've seen so much of their learning and the development of the project as they've gone that feedback's already been given, comments have already been made. If it comes down to report cards, I already have comments that I can put on report cards based on that project, and I'm not waiting for a final deadline date. So when we get to the presentation part of it, whether it's students standing and presenting or a gallery style of presentation, it really is more of a fun, joyful day because all of the hard work has been done by that point. And And so they just get to share their learning and share their ideas versus, me walking around with a clipboard and asking a gazillion questions every single one and trying to create this final mark. I'm so glad we've moved away from that style of assessment for this type of project. So
Yeah.
And it makes it a lot easier for educators when you are documenting that journey and not waiting till the end. So it really makes our jobs easier too. I think.
Makes me think about like the stories along the way that we are catching or capturing for students or with students, and so much agency goes into that too. Like I wonder how much of a difference students would feel along the way, and your teachers capturing those stories and asking you questions and being so interested in your project, and your voice really does matter, and your voice is shaping how the learning as a community will go. That's so exciting.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Any other questions about the questioning process or inquiry process? We've got some pretty incredible middle school educators with us here today.
And some wonderful ideas in the chat as well. And take a look. I know Alex says a busy household. It's what happens when we have school closure days.
Yep. Yeah, connection between mistakes and risk taking. Yeah. Yeah.
Shall I share our last couple of slides, Lauren?
Sure, sounds good. I'm so glad so many people were able to join us. We just wanted to share again our main takeaways about when April and I were sort of thinking about this theme of questioning and inquiry. Our big takeaway was that teaching through a questioning and inquiry lens helps us become attuned to the emergent learning that happens both inside and outside the classroom, and really helps honor and elevate student voices. So we're really appreciative that we got to hear a primary example outdoors, and we got to hear an intermediate example indoors and outdoors, because I know it's so easy to get stuck in a silo of whatever grade we're teaching and where we teach. And I really appreciate hearing other voices and other grades, because I can't wait to see what my bulletin board is going to look like next week, Jared. Just you wait. Very inspiring. So thank you.
Okay, so next session that we hope that you'll be able to make it on February 7th. Our theme will be about relationships. And as I'm hearing the stories today from Kat and from Victoria and from Jared, I'm realizing that none of that could have happened without the relationships that they have with their learners, and relationships that are built within the community and with the land and place. And so we're really excited that next time we will have Ashley Aoki, a grade 5 teacher from Penticton. She'll share some stories about relationships. And then Lynn Tyack, who is a kindergarten teacher, formerly from Richmond, but she is in the Northwest Territories for the year, hopefully just 1 year. And she'll share some stories around that as well. So we hope you'll be able to make it. And before we sign off, we just want to say a big, big thank you to everyone for making this time to connect. And hopefully you've met a new friend or seen a familiar face over the screen.
Yeah, we're going to end the recording and then stick around for a few minutes, because I know